So, if you could tell us a bit about why you think, as a politician, that the EU is so important for science.
Well, I guess any kind of international grouping where you can share ideas and innovation is going to be positive. But all of our experience, as somebody who spent 13 years working in higher education before I ended up as a member of Parliament, and who's got family members who work in higher education still, you see the importance to research, to innovation, of working across borders. You also see EU funding, which comes into not just universities but other research institutes, which creates jobs and creates potential for new businesses and create energy, and it's just a blessing to our culture across the country. So to lose that would be massively detrimental, and nobody believes that the government is going to replace that EU funding with funding of its own.
Yeah, well, even if they were to replace that EU funding with funding of its own, it's clear that you recognise that that's not the same kind of funding, because it doesn't facilitate the same structures and it doesn't give us that diversity and added value.
Yeah, and to many people who are not directly involved in this, it's not a crime to not know how these things work, but to understand that most European research bids have at least half a dozen different countries involved in them, academics from different countries, that help to build a particular field of work, very often very applied, things that can lead to the creation of hundreds and thousands of jobs in the long run, and that only happens if you get people working together. And I guess that because science is the art of discovery and of pushing out boundaries and creating new things, new understanding, but also potentially new products and new innovations, you're always more likely to get an outcome, a good outcome, if you have different brains from different parts of the world. And the EU is not closed. There are plenty of people involved in EU research bids who are people from outside Europe altogether. But Europe is the engine, and it's a tragedy for us if we're outside that engine.
And currently, we're already seeing some fallout in our universities and in our small businesses in terms of people not wanting to come into the country, or people thinking about leaving, or collaborations breaking down because of all the uncertainty of this Brexit process. What can we do at the moment, as our government seems to be in chaos and Labour doesn't seem to be know what they're doing at the moment? What can we do during these circumstances to minimise the damage that seems to be ongoing, to minimise the hemorrhaging of talent?
I think there's two things. First of all, which does cause and is causing that hemorrhaging of talent, and one is uncertainty, as you said, and the other is the public relations disaster internationally that Brexit is, that people outside of Britain, whether we meant it or not, have
and
heard us.
The EU as well.
Absolutely, and it's not just in Europe. I mean, amazingly, you've got even people in Russia not buying British products because they think Britain isn't positive about the rest of the world, and it's really worrying. So that the rest of the world, or so much of it, has heard from the Brexit vote that Britain isn't interested in them, and Britain somehow dislikes them. Now, that may not be, I'm sure that's not what Britain means by its vote, narrow or otherwise, but it's how it's damaged our brand hugely, and that's a hard thing for people who voted to leave to accept, and I understand that, and I'm not pointing the finger at them. I'm saying, however, that is how it's being heard.
It's a consequence of it. So what can we do at the moment, immediately, to try and shore that up?
There's the politics of it all, which is to say, look, Brexit is a moving feast. We voted for narrowly, but we voted to leave in June. What we didn't vote for, and nobody voted for, was the terms of the deal that we're going to get at the end of it. And we're being very clear there should be a referendum on that deal, so people can say, I like that, or I don't like that. And if you don't like it, then you stick with status quo. We remain in the European Union. That means that the people are sovereign, not just at the beginning of the process, but at the end of it as well. That's a fundamental political approach. In terms of scientists, researchers,
you're saying that people have the right to reconsider.
Well, they have a right to consider the deal that's presented for the first. It's not a reconsideration. It's to consider for the first. Whatever it is David Davies gets from his discussions with Brussels, and whatever that deal is, all of us will have to live, particularly younger people in this country, with for the next, let's say, 50 years. It would be totally wrong to have that imposed on the British people without them having their say. And of course, if you're going to give them their say, then the alternative to accepting that deal is to say, do you know what? Thanks very much for that, but we'd rather stick with what we've got. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate and democratic approach, and I think it's clear, and it's one we're campaigning on the ground in Richmond, but elsewhere too.
Well, good to know you've got your options open, and we're delighted to support Sarah here because she's making all the right noises as well about the importance of science for all of our community, you know, for the local communities and the businesses that all of that generates, to who we are in the international world and the power that we have. So we're seeing that in her.
We're
think
grateful.
It's important to get rid of Zach if we can, and so.
My sense of just a final word of all this, because I think that one of the things that maybe cost Remain the campaign, and indeed cost Hillary Clinton over in the States, is that there was a lack of emotion about the logical and right side of the argument, and I think that's a reasonable thing to accuse us of, actually. And I'm one of those people on the left who is not squeamish about being patriotic. I am patriotic, and what are we patriotic about? It's our great achievements, and where have we achieved more as a country, admittedly with others, in the worlds of science, our involvement with the European Space Agency and all those sorts of things. We should be massively proud as a country of our scientific endeavour, and you only achieve those things by working with others. So anyway, thank you very much.
Just one of the things that gutted me about the referendum debate was everyone was believe in Britain, but don't listen to the British institutions. You know, all the big, long-standing British institutions that have gone and done their own research. You know, the strength of Britain and its and that was thrown aside for a Believe in Britain message. I just didn't get that. Anyway, but thanks ever so much for.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant.
Take care. Bye bye. Thanks.